If you really, truly, genuinely love working on third generation Honda Preludes, I have 2 words for you. Get help. Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears and the Fortress of Failure. We're back here with the Prelude in what I believe is the 3rd installment of this major service. This started off as a more or less quickly fixing some leaks. My car had some leaks in the cooling system, in the oil system, and in the power steering system. So I started taking some things apart, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where I had to remove the intake manifold. I had to remove everything on the left side of the engine here. I had to take off the timing belt because my water pump was leaking. Timing belt was going bad. Timing belt tensioner was starting to grind. So it really was a whole lot of work. And why was that surprising to me? I don't know. I've only had this car for 20 years. I think what was surprising to me was it really did feel like I had just done this work. And I guess I was completely wrong. I guess I had done this work at least 10 years ago. And that really kind of lines up now that I think about it. Perhaps I was thinking about doing the work on another car. I've owned 3 of these. This has always been my primary prelude. When you do this kind of work and then you drive it for a long time, you just kind of, I don't know, time flies. Time doesn't mean anything, especially when there's the world's insane. So I guess just more time had passed than I had thought, and a lot of these parts just went bad with age and miles. So I started to take it all apart, and now I have just a giant pile of parts in my garage. The good news is that last week we left off with most of the parts we needed to get this thing together. I received the water pipe back from my welder, and it looks fantastic. Put some paint on it, and it's ready to go in. Filled my motor mounts. They are now filled with 60A polyurethane, so I have solid motor mounts for a fraction of the cost. Hopefully that means that I'll have a complete car again pretty soon. So let's get started. I think I'm going to work on the water pipe first because the motor mount over here I need to get some bolts for, and I just don't feel like going to the hardware store. And if I can get the back side of this motor done, it's actually going to feel really, really good. I'm going to be really encouraged to continue on with this project and to hopefully finish up. I got the oil cooler on, and suffice to say, it was not the most enjoyable experience of my life. That inch-long hose was really hard to get on, and then I cut this one too short by accident. Thankfully, it came in a U shape, so I was able to just cut out the other side of the U a little bit longer and fight with it for another 10-15 minutes, and it went on there. So here's what happened. I spent 10 minutes looking for my needle nose pliers so that I could have a good angle on these spring clamps. However, I couldn't find them. So I grabbed this guy, my needle nose channel lock. And this actually worked out a lot better than I thought, because I was able to lock the spring open. And this was especially useful up here, where you have to put both of the springs on and then put the oil cooler in place. So I just had the spring clamp locked open, and it was just kind of hanging there, and I just let it sit there. I was able to get an angle and let it rest on, I guess, this up here. So I was able to get that on there, and while I was pressing it in, I had to thread in this long bolt nut thing. It's a bolt nut. It's both a nut and a bolt. Once I found a thread, I then torqued it down with the big socket, and that got this pressed in where it needed to go, and then I just released the spring clamp where it needed to be, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, but there it is. It is in place where it needs to be, thankfully. And this one too was, I don't want to say it was easier, but it kind of was a little bit easier just because it's easier to reach. It was still really difficult. But that said, the water pipe is also installed. I think it's where it needs to be, because I have the bolt strap cinched down here. So this is definitely where Honda thinks it's supposed to be. Now, will that provide a seal there? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out the hard way. Next, I am actually, before I put the intake manifold in, I'm going to put those two hoses on and then just stick them through the manifold as I'm installing it. That'll just make my life a little bit easier rather than having the manifold here and trying to fight the hoses on to these to these outlets. I really hope one of the coke addicts over at Honda got fired over this back in 1987 when this car was being developed. Because how? I guarantee you, no mechanic saw this and said, yeah, that looks legit. Word of warning. The pre-molded hose that comes for your lower heater hose or your heater return hose, that hose is too small. The only way I'm going to be able to replace this again is if I cut this off and pull the entire pipe again, which is going to mean taking off the intake manifold again, because this car is just so brilliant to work on. So now I have to work all of this crap back through the shifter cables, back through the power steering line, back through the wiring harness, and all the other junk in the back of this engine in order to get this pipe back in. I may as well put this dumb thing on before I put this in, because I'm just going to have more trouble with it. None of this is the correct size for this pipe, even though this came... Scratch my car again. Even though this came pre-molded, this is supposed to fit exactly, and it doesn't. So I had to take apart half my car again. I get to go struggle with my oil cooler again, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I am in for just a blast for the next half hour of my day. Somebody signed off on that. That hose supposedly is made for this car. It does not fit. But I got it on there anyway. Oh God, my elbow hurts. So I had to do whatever I could. First, I tried to stretch out the end of this with my bent needle nose. I just stuck the needle, the end in there, and pulled it apart as hard as I could. That kind of got things started. And then I used a whole bunch of grease from the synthetic grease tub over there. And when that didn't work, I tried that for probably a good half hour off and on, and I was screaming and crying and begging for mercy and cursing a Honda. Then I decided I should do something different, because what I was doing was not working, which means that literally anything else is a better bet than the thing that I've been doing for the past half hour. So I grabbed my heat gun and I started to heat up the end of that there hose. I did that probably 3 or 4 times and put more grease on it, and finally, it's in there. I do have to put the clamp on, but once I get the clamp on, I am going to take a break, because I am in a lot of pain now. This car is very hard to work on. Anybody that says, oh, all you gotta do is change the oil and keep the fluids topped off, they have no idea what they're talking about. They do not know. This car is terrible. I haven't encountered anything so stupid, even with the Miata. Because the Miata's stupidity was the stupidity of the previous owner. There wasn't a single bit of stupidity in the Miata that was a shortfall of engineering. This is awful. There isn't a single shortcoming on the Jeep. Well, there are shortcomings in engineering on the Jeep, but everything about the Jeep is more simple than this. And the Jeep is 10 years newer than the Prelude. Keep that in mind. So this is rough. This car is rough. I have no desire to have any car that is harder to work on than this, because this car might even be why I have anxiety issues. So before I put the intake manifold on, I decided to give it a good scrub down. And at some point I had to call it, because these little parts are really, 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 really hard to clean with only a wire toothbrush. So I just, did the best I could, and had to pull the plug at some point. I have to get this thing in the car. I have a little bit more cleanup to do inside these injector ports here, but once I do that, I'm putting this in the car. Ah, geez. Here I am scraping my intake manifold with a pick instead of installing it in my car. Is this how it starts? Is this really how this all starts? Am I going to be scrubbing every single part of this car from now until the end of time? Let me know in the comments. Somebody approved this. Somebody saw this design and said, yep, looks legit. Well, I replaced that monstrosity. This is just about ready to go back together, except I have to put the fuel rail on. Well, let's go take a look at that fuel rail. So it seems I done goofed. You see this right here? This little space there? I do believe that there is a little plastic stop that's supposed to go there. And there's supposed to be 4 of them. And I can't find a single one of them. There's one, but I found this just hanging out in the engine compartment. I actually believe this is from the Miata. So I am likely going to have to buy new ones, because if I can't find them, I mean, here's the thing. I don't typically lose 4 identical pieces of anything. I typically lose 1. So the fact that they're all gone kind of gives me hope that I'll be able to find it somewhere in this garage, but I'm not having such luck. It's not a pain in the ass. It's a challenge. Man, get the out of here with that. I have the new gasket for the timing cover. I have more or less repaired the timing cover. It's not pretty, but you won't see it behind the pulley. But then I went to go put it on, and I noticed not only had I broken one of these guys, but I lost 2 more. I actually think I only lost 1 more, because I think 1 is in this bag, yeah. So I lost another one in addition to the one that's broken. So this is a real bummer. So I managed to find these. They are the same height, and they are the same inner diameter, but they are not the same outer diameter. This one is just slightly bigger. That's kind of a problem, because they don't fit. They just drop right through. So I got to do something about that. Not exactly sure what to do yet. And in addition to that, I've got this one that is missing half the plastic. So probably going to have to do some more zip tie grafting here to create something to hold this in. And I'm probably going to put this one in here because it's the closest thing to a good fit. These guys, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I think what I'll do is shove some zip ties in there, solder it in, and hope it holds. Well, that's not pretty. However, this one actually came out much better than I expected, because if you remember, there was no material on about half of that ring, and I added all kinds of zip tie material. And that came out a lot better than I thought. These ones were not as successful, but I think they're going to be just fine because all I was really interested in was getting the little spacers to just hold in place while I'm putting the thing on the car. So yeah, again, not pretty, but I'm pretty sure it'll be functional. Let's see if this fits.
I'm pretty sure I put it on backwards. See where it kind of bends outward at the edge here? I think that needs to be on the side of the belt. I put it on backwards.
Well, that was a journey. You know, I've done this more than 2 times before on this car. You'd think it would get easier as you get experienced, but no. So I put the upper cover on, and now the harmonic balancer is on. The damaged harmonic balancer, by the way. And look at just how close it is to the timing cover. I have a feeling it's going to just kind of make a new groove out of what I filled in, or just knock it all out entirely and then catch in my timing belt and bend 13 valves. But it does appear to be correctly positioned, because if you look at the position of the power steering tensioner, it's pretty much dead on. Oh, fuck this. Fuck my life. Fuck everything. You gotta be kidding me. You've gotta be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Don't buy new mounts. Just fill your existing ones. Jesus Christ. This is so stupid. This is so stupid. You know, the reason this is so upsetting is because it's not like I'm doing any kind of custom fabrication here. I'm just doing some maintenance. And everything, I may as well be building a new car, because it just requires so much crap. I got this trimmed back. I also hammered on this little bracket back here to get it pushed in a little bit more, and it's really close. I think I'm going to hammer it one more time, because I can get this thing down if I just push in the plastic a little bit. So I'm really close. So I'm just going to hammer this one more time, and then I'm going to throw some paint on it so it doesn't rust and fall out of the engine. Well, the good news is I got this all back together. I mean, you can't even tell what's going on anymore. There's just so much crap here. So I got this brackets on to the intake manifold, to the block. Obviously put the oil filter on. I hear that's pretty important. I put the exhaust on. At least I did on one side. This side, I can't find the bolts. So I'm just going to do something else until I find the bolts, and probably forget about it until I go to start the car. That'll be fun. I got the cross member on and the cover for the flywheel, and there's a weird little bracket over here that I had almost forgotten about, and I put that on too. So down here is pretty good. I still have to put the timing cover on, but I want to give it a test fire before I get that confident. I also want to rotate this thing by hand so that I can listen for any kind of, scratching on plastic sounds, which will probably happen. I don't think that I can get this down any farther just by tightening the bolts. I'll give it a try, but I think that's as good as it's going to get. And then over here, I also don't want to put the accessory belts on because I have to take off these stupid little hoses in here, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to go about doing that. So I know that I don't want to remove any structural parts of the car. I don't know what that means for my future. I am probably going to be pissed off, though. Up here, I did manage to get the motor mount on, but I think it's because this was an eBay special, it wasn't quite right. So I did, after hammering and grinding back here, I got it on well enough, and then this bolt didn't quite line up, and then that meant that this bracket was really tough to get these bolts to line up, and I'm fairly certain I chewed up the threads on that long bolt there. So that is going to make for a great time someday down the future for future me. Next, I can actually put the new valve cover gasket on and then fill this thing with oil, because I want to make sure that I am going to leak oil. I'm at this point, knowing how lucky I am, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to leak oil. I just want to make sure of it before I do any more of this stuff. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. We did make a lot of progress. It was infuriating progress, but we got through it, and we are actually, thankfully, on the downhill of this thing. I know I have a lot to say about how terrible this car is to work on, but trust me when I say that the driving experience is 100% worth it. I've owned this car for 20 years. I've done this work before, and while it doesn't get any easier, in fact, when you own other cars, it kind of starts to feel a little more difficult. Like I said, it's worth it. This is an amazing car. I wasn't planning for this to be a 4-part series, but that's where we're at right now, and we got to roll with it. Hopefully next week, I'll have this thing together, and we'll be able to take it out on a drive. And then the video after that will be our drive through 300,000 miles. And if this ends up taking another 8 weeks, well, if that's what the car needs, that's what the car's going to get. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, comment. If you don't like what you see, maybe you're some kind of Prelude apologist. Maybe you just bought your Prelude and you're still trying to convince yourself it was a good idea. Well, if that was you, then we have a difference of opinion. I want to know about it. Leave a comment anyway. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.